This is gonna be the ultimate Nordic showdown. Sweden versus Finland, which is the best country in the Nordics. Sweden and Finland share a lot of history and they seem really similar. Both are small countries in the far north, famous for innovation, metal bands, and winter depression. But only one country will reign supreme after this fierce battle. Let's dive into history, culture, lifestyle, economy, and a lot more. It's time to decide who will be the ultimate Nordic champion. Let's start by comparing some basic country facts. Sweden is bigger at 447,000 square kilometers versus Finland's 338,500 square kilometers. And there's 10.5 million people in Sweden compared to 5.6 million in Finland. Both countries have huge areas that are sparsely populated and not very urbanized. You could argue that a less populated place is a good thing, but I think that you'd only argue that if you're an introverted redneck from Lapland. Bigger is better, so Sweden has some bonus points compared to Finland. Sweden also has a lot of islands, more than 265,000 in fact, which is the most in the entire world. So obviously more than Finland's 178,000 islands, which is still quite a lot. And Sweden also has a lot of lakes, almost 100,000 lakes. But Finland is called the land of 1,000 lakes, and they actually have quite a few more than just 1,000. A whopping 188,000 lakes, so yeah, that's one area where Finland beats Sweden. Finland also has 4.2% more forests than Sweden, and also the cleanest tap water in the world. Sweden also ranks among the best in the world, so yeah, it's not a huge difference. Now let's talk about the weather as well. If you like snow and cold, then Finland is the place for you. But no sane person likes snow and cold, so even if I often complain about the weather in Sweden, Sweden does have better weather than Finland. Sweden extends further to the south, and the climate is milder in general. If you don't count the areas in the far north of Sweden, that's where you find mosquito-infested swamps and snow and ice and lots of other pleasantries. But overall, Sweden has a warmer and better climate, even if it's hard to believe when you look at all the snow in Stockholm right now. Looking at the general country statistics, it's pretty close. Both countries are quite similar. But ultimately, this category goes to Sweden. Yay! Ruotsi! 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 So yeah, this was the first skirmish, but the war is far from over. Because now it's time to look at the quality of life in both countries. There's a lot of things to consider when it comes to quality of life, but let's cover a couple of different areas. Both countries have world-class, tax-funded universal healthcare, and that healthcare is among the best in the world. But Sweden has a problem with long waiting times for that excellent care. Finland is more decentralized and offers higher satisfaction overall. So yeah, go Suomi. And Sweden has a life expectancy of 79 for men and 82 for women. But Finland has a life expectancy of 84 for men and 85 for women. Sweden ranks 8th on the Corruption Perceptions Index, as in it's the 8th best country in the world. That's pretty good, but Finland ranks number 2. It's the second least corrupt country in the world after Denmark. Danskjävlar! When it comes to infrastructure, both countries feature top-tier road networks, public transport, and internet connectivity. To be honest, I can't really find all that much that differs between these countries in that regard. Everything is mostly just working in both Sweden and Finland, even if there's of course a lot to complain about in both countries. Trains in Sweden are often delayed and they're expensive as well, but the same goes for Finland. So that point is pretty even. When looking at fertility, Sweden has a pretty miserable 1.7 children born for every woman, which is below 2.1, which is required to not have a shrinking population. So you'd think that this would be another feather in Finland's cap, but nope. Finland has 1.3 children born for every woman. And I'm not gonna make a joke about those 0.3 children, which has to be really small. Now, both Sweden and Finland have pretty decent education systems, even if there's a lot of issues in both countries. Overall, Finland's education has a much better reputation though. Now, we have to talk a bit about safety too. Sweden gets a lot of flack for its rampant violent crime, but compared to the rest of the world, it's still an extremely safe country. And Finland does have a history of struggling with deadly crime, but these days they have a massively lower crime index. Finland is also the happiest country in the world, so yeah, that's pretty hard to beat. But strangely enough, despite that, Finland has also struggled with a lot of people who end their lives prematurely. And both Sweden and Finland struggles with depression, even if they're supposedly some of the happiest people in the world. Living in the cold north isn't perfect, in other words, even if it's pretty damn good. And out of these two pretty damn good countries, there's one that stands out just a little bit more when it comes to quality of life. And that's Finland. We need to talk about the capitals of each country. Helsinki is a lovely city in summer. It's got an awesome harbor front with a Ferris wheel and a swimming area. There's also some nice markets and shopping malls, and of course museums and a zoo as well. But Helsinki also has a bit of a small town feeling. Stockholm, on the other hand, is bigger and grander. I mean, it's not a big city, but it's bigger than Helsinki. There's more people and more to do in Stockholm. There are more restaurants, more activities, and it has a more cosmopolitan feeling, even if it isn't much compared to actual big cities. Stockholm is a small big city, while Helsinki is a big town instead. Helsinki has a lot of amazing architecture, like the Helsinki Cathedral, and the Linnanmäki amusement park is also a lot of fun. And the Korkeasaari Zoo is also a nice place to visit. But Stockholm also has amazing architecture, Old Town, the Gröna Lund amusement park, and the open-air museum and zoo Skansen. It also has the ABBA Museum, the Vasa Museum, the Archipelago, and more events to choose from. I think you know where this is heading. I like Helsinki, it's a good city, but Stockholm takes the prize as the best capital. Sweden has a much larger economy than Finland, with a GDP of more than 600 billion US dollars, compared to Finland's less than 300 billion. And the GDP per capita is also higher in Sweden. So it seems like Sweden is off to a good start in the economy category. However, Sweden has a higher inflation than Finland, at more than 2% compared to 1.2% in Finland. And the cost of living is higher in Sweden as well, so maybe things aren't looking all that good for Sweden after all. Especially when you consider that Finland has a slightly higher average wage. Salaries in both Sweden and Finland are pretty low compared to many other Western countries, but Finland is slightly less bad than Sweden. But what about unemployment? Well, things aren't looking good for Sweden there either. Both countries have an unemployment rate of more than 8%, but Sweden has 8.5% compared to Finland's 8.3%. But surely, taxes must be higher in Finland at least, right? Unfortunately not. Both countries have a very high taxation, but overall, Sweden often has slightly higher taxes. And also higher costs of living, especially in Stockholm. So both countries have a similar purchasing power, but Finland is slightly better off. But there's more to the economy than taxes and costs of living. Let's talk about the industry of respective country as well. Finland has a lot of wood processing and machinery and electrical engineering. Sweden has an automotive industry as well as engineering and pharma as well as a bit of mining. In general, Sweden's industry is a bit more varied and diversified, with everything from Volvo to H&M and IKEA. On top of that, both countries also has a lot of telecom and gaming and other IT companies. Finland has Nokia, which is a shadow of its former self, and Sweden has companies like Ericsson, which is also a shadow of its former self, but also companies like Spotify and many others. Oh, and speaking of gaming, 20% of the Steam revenue for 2025 came from Swedish game companies. That said, Finland can still stand tall with games like City Skyline, Max Payne and Returnal. But then again, they've also created Angry Birds and Clash of Clans. If it wasn't for Sweden's Candy Crush, I'd say that Finland has a lot to atone for. I should mention that Finland uses the euro, while Sweden still uses the Swedish krona, and Finland's use of the euro, as I understand it, is causing some issues with the Finnish economy. But I'm not gonna dive into the euro debate right now. Let's try to weigh it all together, and I'd say that there's a lot of pros and cons for each country. Sweden has a bigger GDP, but Finland has a better purchasing power per capita. Sweden has a more diversified industry, while Finland also has a lot of large and significant companies, even if they've also lost a lot of trade to Russia lately. I think I'll just take the easy way out and give each country a point. Yeah, you can complain about me sitting on the fence, but there's no winner. Or rather, both countries are winners in the economy category. Now let's talk about the military. Which country has the strongest military? I should just give this point to Finland straight away, right? Finland's gotta have the strongest military. Well, it's not as clear-cut as you might think. Finland definitely has the strongest land-based army, but Sweden has a strong navy and air force. Finland also has more manpower despite having a smaller population, and that's because they've kept up the conscription, unlike Sweden. Sweden focuses a bit more on research and development with its submarines and the JAS-39 Gripen fighter jet, for example. So each country's military strength depends a bit on the environment. If you're attacking the Baltic Sea, well, yeah, then Sweden is vastly superior, especially since Finland isn't allowed to build any submarines. If you're attacking by land, then Finland sweeps the floor with Sweden. Some comparison sites online say that Sweden has an overall stronger military. But some analysts say that Finland is battle-ready and hardened and much stronger than Sweden. I don't really know how to judge this, so I think I'm just gonna have to make this category yet another draw. Let's dive into a bit of culture as well. Finland has a unique blend of Finnish, Sami, and a bit of Russian culture. Finnish people are quiet and independent, and they value equality and trust. Sauna isn't just a casual pastime in Finland, it's a defining feature of their society. They have a deep connection with nature, and Finnish sisu is an important aspect of their mentality. Sisu is inner strength and having the power and the resilience to overcome anything that the world throws at you. All of this has created an introspective people with a flair for design and architecture. Kalevala is the national epic of Finland, and you've probably seen designs from companies like Iittala and Marimekko. And of course, we mustn't forget about the Finnish composer Juan Sibelius, famous for the Finlandia Suite, among other works. And I also need to mention Alvar Aalto, the world-famous Finnish architect. Now, all of this is seriously impressive. So how does Sweden stand up to such a cultural onslaught? Sweden and Finland share a lot of history because Finland used to be Swedish for hundreds of years. Many Finns speak Swedish, and it's very easy for a Swede to fit in Finland. Even if there are some cultural stereotypes, Finns view Swedes as weak and feeble, and Swedes view Finns as knife-wielding drunkards. And Swedes are a bit weak compared to Finns. Swedes are a bit more laid back and cozy. We like our fika and not having to wade through ice and snow. Most of the time, at least. We believe in work-life balance and spending time on hobbies and travel and enjoying the nicer things in life. Swedes are a bit less gruff than Finns, a bit more relaxed, a bit more consensus-seeking. And this collaborative mentality could be a reason that Sweden is a bit more broad when it comes to art and culture. Swedish design should be pretty obvious given examples like IKEA and H&M. And you have some famous glassworks brands like Kosta Boda. And let's not forget about those hundreds of Swedish crime novels that people are reading all over the world. And of course, then we have Swedish music. Sure, Finland has some awesome metal bands and some good EDM and so on, but come on. ABBA, Avicii, Robin, Roxette, Ace of Base, Europe, Swedish House Mafia, First Aid Kit, and let's not forget about Ghost or The Cardigans or hundreds of other really famous Swedish musicians. I think I have to give this category to Sweden. Sorry, Finland. Every year, there's an athletics competition called Finnkampen, or Suomi Ruotsi maaottelu as it's called in Finnish, or at least in my closest approximation of Finnish. It's a fierce competition between Finland and Sweden, where each country tries to determine which has the best athletes. And that rivalry extends to other sports as well, hockey and other winter sports in particular. Finland is quite good at winter sports for obvious reasons, and they also have a lot of good rally drivers. But Sweden wins more Olympic medals and has consistently showed better performance in many sports. So you might think that this is another point for Sweden, but the thing is, I don't really care about sports. This category is completely useless to me, so I'm just gonna skip it. No one gets the point. I just can't be arsed about sports at all, and it doesn't matter who's best. But speaking of sports, I have to complain a bit about Finland. For many years, I used to be able to Google my name because it's a pretty unusual combination. But ever since that damn hockey player from Finland called Miro Karjalainen joined NHL, I can barely find any results at all for my name. Damn you, Miro Karjalainen, change your name. I was the first and the original. Instead of sports, I want to talk about something a bit more abstract, the people of each country. I've already talked a bit about the differences in mentality between Sweden and Finland, but there's more to cover. Finland is known for having beautiful women, but then again, so is Sweden. Sweden also has a reputation for having fashionably dressed people of both genders. And I'm of course the exception to that rule. Both countries care about nature and the environment, but Finland might just be a little bit more in tune with nature than Sweden. And both countries have a reputation as an introverted country, but Finland is definitely more so than Sweden. Swedes are more open, but on the other hand, Finns might be kinder. Swedes also suffer from a big brother mentality. Sweden sees itself as the natural leader of the Nordics. We're the biggest country, we have the biggest GDP, and we have tons of important companies. And we can also be pretty arrogant about it. Finland is more relaxed and quietly confident in comparison. And Sweden also struggles with a lot of issues these days, violent crime and racism, for example. Not that Finland is completely spared, of course. You've probably seen those Finnish politicians who made fun of Asian people, for example. Not exactly showing off that Finnish kindness in the best possible way. But that's pretty minor compared to all the issues Sweden has had with Koran burnings and explosions and whatnot. This is a difficult category to award a point in, but I think that I'm leaning towards Finland. People are a bit rough around the edges there, but there's also a lot of kindness hidden underneath that rough exterior. And I just have to mention the languages as well. Swedish is a tonal language, and people abroad often mention that it has a kind of singing quality. But that's nothing compared to Finnish, which comes from a completely separate language branch. And Tolkien even took inspiration from Finnish for the Elvish languages in Lord of the Rings. A country with a language like that definitely deserves a special point. So, given all of this, which is the best country? Well, we can just look at the score, and the score says that it's been a fierce battle, but one country stands victorious. One country stands as the best country in the Nordics. But wait a second, if this is supposed to be a Nordic battle, what about the other countries? Iceland is awesome, but it's just too small to compete. Sorry, Iceland. And Denmark is just full of drunk and lazy people, so I'm not even gonna compare Denmark against Sweden. But what about Norway? Norway has stunning nature, kind and happy people, and it's one of the richest countries in the world. They have lower crime than both Sweden and Finland, and they're famous for their Viking heritage. Lots of great music has come from Norway, and they're doing really well in winter sports. I think I just might have wasted your time with this video. Because the winner is neither Sweden nor Finland. Norway comes up from behind as the unexpected but well-deserved champion. And on that bombshell, it's time to end this video. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something about the Nordics. Like and subscribe, but most importantly, have a great day.